Hiya, my name's Mark. I'm going to be doing some Vostok modding tutorials. I've been requested to do so from a couple of fans of Vostoks who want to have a look and see how easy it is to do these things. The first one I'm going to do is the simple bezel change. Now, most people who buy a Vostok see the bezel and think, you know what, I want something a bit nicer than that. Myself personally, for this particular model, this is the 420-526 Zissou model. I quite like it with the stock bezel on. The only problem is with this guy is if you look up there, there's been some damage to the top corner. Corner of a circle, I don't quite know how that happens. But up here at the top there's some damage, so I'm going to replace it with this shiny new bezel. Exactly the same, so like for like. It's really simple to do this. What we've got is a case back remover that I've covered in some sellotape so that I don't cause any damage. What we do first off is make sure that the crown is nice and tight, and then I insert it at a slight angle and then use that to lever up the bezel. Now this guy has come off quite easily. Sometimes they can be a little bit more tricky, not too often, but sometimes they can be a little trickier than that. If they're quite tight, then it's quite hard to get them off. This one span quite loosely, but now this is off. The one thing that you make sure that you do if you are taking them off is to take care of the crystal, because it is an acrylic crystal, can crack quite easily, so make sure that you don't cause any damage to that. If you've got an older Vostok, then sometimes it's nice to clean this out before you do any of the bezel around here, before you put a new one on. But this guy he's not too old, so I'm not going to bother cleaning him today. Now this is our new bezel. Inside the bezel, as you can see, there is a spring that goes all the way around. It's an octagonal shaped spring and it retains the bezel on the Vostok. Without that spring, it would just go on, fall back off again. This spring keeps it held on, and then you can use it as a bi-directional bezel the way that Vostoks do. The one thing that's massively important, normally if you buy a new bezel you'll get a spring already included, but you have to make sure that every single bit of the spring where it bends, so the octagonal edges there, are actually covered up inside the groove, and including the ends as well of the springs. If there's a single bit showing, then these won't go on and you'll end up bending the wire, often meaning that you have to then buy another wire to do it again. So this one has already got a spring in, so I will see if it goes on. If I hold it in place over and then apply pressure, you should hear a pop. Now that's on, I can feel that it's moving. There is the bi-directional movement of the Vostok there, that's gone on quite nicely. And it's not too loose so that I can't just move it as I go past it. Now some of the problems that you'll encounter with these, that was a quick simple one for me, but these springs, as I say, let me get this one out. They do sometimes not line up. Now that's the octagonal shape, and as we put it back inside the little groove, a little bit fiddly with the camera in the way. Now I've purposely done this one wrong, but if you look here on that bit there, this one is not inside. Now if I tried to put this bezel on, this wire portion here would just bend and it wouldn't snap on. You wouldn't be able to do it no matter how much force you put on, you just end up wrecking the spring and possibly your crystal as well. So it's massively important that you go around, make sure that every single bit of those edges is inside. If it's not inside, then you can bend and reshape the wire ever so slightly to get them to sit right. It's a bit of trial and errors to find out how it bends, but you have to basically see if this one was out, you'd have to see whether it was because this one was bent too much in, or whether this one here is causing it to stop, because this one needs to be bent up a little bit there, and then that'll let that one sit in place. Once you've done it a couple of times, it will become much easier to figure it out. But for the first few times, you may get yourself quite frustrated trying to figure it out. It took me a long while to get used to it. Now, in regards to this wire, there we go, popped it right out. This wire itself, when it's normally installed and you pop your bezel on, some of them can be nice like this one. This is a perfect fit, so I'm really happy with that. Or they can just spin round freely, which is not what most people want. Or they can be absolutely wedged solid shut and you can't move it. And that's where you have to adjust the spring. Now, if it is too tight, then what you do is you go around each one of the little corners and bend it out ever so slightly. Every single one, do it the same for each one, but you get more so that it's wider that way. And then when you install it properly, you will find that it will be looser. Keep doing it till it's as loose as you want, or the opposite, if it's too loose, then do it the other way, so bend them in ever so slightly, all very uniformly, because you want to keep that octagonal shape. And then pop that in, and that will be tighter. The other thing you can do if you're having real difficulty with installing one, I haven't had to do this yet, but I've read about it sometimes, is if you snip off one of these ends so there isn't the full octagon, so there's only 7 sides. It won't be as tight of a fit, but it will help if you're having massive difficulty with a spring. All bezels are very different, some of them much easier than others. But you don't have to just do it with stock bezels, as you see here with this Zissou. This is the like-for-like stock. This guy here, which is my 420-059, this has got a bezel from Merinom. Merinom are one of the factories who supply Vostok watches, and this installed the exact same way. So to recap, case back remover, inside there with the crown screwed in nice and tight, pop it off. If it's too difficult, take your time, don't force it because you don't want to cause any damage to the crystal. Once it's off, get your new bezel. Make sure it's got a spring in. If it hasn't got a spring, you can use a new one that you've bought yourself, or you can use the old one from your last bezel and put it in. Make sure that when the spring's in, all the edges, all the corners are completely covered up, and the ends of the spring too, so that you can't see any of those corners. Once you're happy with that and you've got the fit right and you've bent it slightly to make sure that it's perfect, then place it on top, fingers on top, push with uniform force, and you should hear a nice pop, a nice satisfying pop. If you don't feel the pop and it's feeling like it's not going down, don't try and force it because you'll bend the spring, and then just try and reshape it again to make sure it's right. When you hear the pop, done. Check it, see how tight it is and whether you need to readjust it. If it's too tight, pop it off and then loosen, bend out. If it's too loose, then bend them in and try again. So that's it, fairly simple. I've done it to most of my Vostok so far. If you need any help or anything like that, please throw me a question, or I'll answer it as best I can. And I will see you on the next video. Thank you very much.